For Arthur, independence wasn't just a word, it was the entire architecture of his life. At 68, he still mowed his own lawn, managed his own finances, and prided himself on never having to ask for help. His days were built on a foundation of quiet competence. He was the one his wife, Helen, called to reach the high shelf, the one his daughter relied on to move a heavy piece of furniture. This was his identity. But lately, small, almost imperceptible cracks had begun to appear in that foundation. Last spring, lifting a 40-pound bag of potting soil from the car, he felt a strain in his back that surprised him. He'd done it 100 times before without a thought. He paused, catching his breath, and told himself he must have just twisted wrong. A few weeks later, stepping off a curb, his leg didn't feel quite as steady as it should. There was a flicker of instability, a split-second wobble that he quickly corrected. No one saw it. He brushed it off. And he started noticing that when faced with a flight of stairs or an elevator, he was choosing the elevator more often. Each time, a small, quiet voice in his head would offer the same reassuring explanation. Well, you're not getting any younger. It was a phrase he repeated to Helen, a simple, acceptable truth that closed the conversation. It was just a sign of getting older. These moments were isolated, easy to dismiss. They were disconnected data points that never formed a pattern because he refused to connect them. They were private concessions, filed away and forgotten. Until one Sunday afternoon, his 7-year-old granddaughter, Chloe, was trying to make her own sandwich. She padded into the living room, holding up a brand new factory-sealed jar of pickles, her small hands unable to get any purchase on the lid. "Grandpa," she said, looking up at him with complete faith, "can you open this for me?" "Of course, sweetheart," he smiled, taking the jar. It was a familiar ritual, a small act of grandfatherly strength. He wrapped his hand around the smooth glass, the other gripping the metal lid. He twisted. Nothing. He repositioned his grip, planted his feet a little wider, and put his shoulder into it. The lid didn't budge. He felt the muscles in his forearm strain, a slight tremor running up his arm. He tried the old trick of tapping it on the counter, then wrapped a dish towel around the lid for a better grip. He twisted again, with a grunt this time. Still nothing. Chloe watched him, her head tilted. The silence in the kitchen was suddenly immense. In that moment, it wasn't a jar of pickles. It was a test. And he was failing it. A flush of heat crept up his neck. It was a profound, private, and deeply uncomfortable blow to his identity. Helen eventually came in and opened it with a quick pop after running it under hot water. But the damage was done. Later that evening, sitting in his armchair, Arthur stared at his own hands. The hands that had built a deck, changed countless tires, and held his children. They looked the same, but they felt different. That moment with the jar wasn't a medical crisis. It wasn't a fall. It wasn't a diagnosis. But it was something more unsettling. It was a message. What Arthur couldn't possibly know was that the potting soil, the unsteady curb, and the stubborn pickle jar were not random, disconnected events. They were symptoms. They were the late-stage, visible signs of a single underlying process. A silent process that didn't begin last spring or even last year. It began, without his knowledge or consent, decades ago. These moments of quiet frustration are incredibly common, but what's not common is a clear, evidence-based understanding of what truly connects them, and that is exactly why we're here today. I'm Dr. Dean, and for more than 2 decades, I've worked with patients who have stories just like Arthur's. Stories of small, quiet losses that add up to a profound sense of unease. They feel a change in their own bodies, a subtle shift in their capabilities, but when they mention it, the concern is often met with a well-meaning but dismissive pat on the back. It's just a normal part of getting older. And here, on this channel, is where we challenge that very idea. Our mission is to look at every aspect of health through what I call the longevity lens. This isn't about just extending your lifespan, adding more years to your life. It's about extending your health span, adding more life, more function, and more independence to your years. It's about ensuring that your 80s and 90s are defined by engagement and freedom, not by frailty and dependence. The conventional medical system is, for the most part, a system of reaction. It is brilliant at treating a heart attack once it happens. It is masterful at repairing a hip after it breaks. But it is largely silent on the slow, simmering processes that lead to those crises in the first place. It often fails to connect the dots between the potting soil, the unsteady curb, and the pickle jar because it isn't trained to look for the pattern. My purpose here is to give you the evidence-based knowledge that often gets lost in a 15-minute doctor's visit. To empower you with the tools to understand the changes happening in your body, not as an inevitable decline, but as a series of biological processes that you can influence, manage, and in many cases even reverse. We are here to fill that gap, to provide the crucial information that allows you to be the chief architect of your own quality of life. So let's connect those dots for Arthur. Let's give a name to the invisible force that was quietly eroding the foundation of his independence. Because what he was experiencing isn't just getting old. It's a specific diagnosable medical condition. And it has a name, sarcopenia. This isn't just a new piece of terminology. It's a fundamental reframing of what was happening to Arthur and what may be happening to millions of others who believe they are simply getting old. Because that belief, that this slow decline is normal and unavoidable, is one of the most pervasive and damaging misconceptions in modern medicine. Let me state this clearly. Sarcopenia is not just aging. I believe it is the single most important yet widely ignored predictor of your independence and quality of life in your later years. Our medical system is built for emergencies. It's brilliant at responding to a heart attack or surgically repairing a fractured hip. But it is profoundly, dangerously silent on the slow motion condition that sets the stage for so many of these crises. It's a system designed to react to the fall, not to prevent it by addressing the underlying weakness that made the fall so much more likely. Sarcopenia is a silent epidemic. It doesn't arrive like a sudden illness. It is a slow, methodical erosion of the very foundation of your physical freedom, happening for decades before the first obvious symptom, like a stubborn pickle jar, appears. It's the quiet thief of your future. So, to take back control, we first need to understand the thief we're dealing with. In this video, we are going to pull back the curtain on sarcopenia. We'll approach this by breaking down the problem into 4 clear, understandable parts. First, we will define exactly what sarcopenia is, using the official clinical criteria. This is crucial because understanding the enemy is the first step to defeating it. It's not just about feeling weak, it's a measurable condition. Second, we'll uncover the 3 hidden drivers that cause it to start, often silently, as early as your 30s. This is the forbidden knowledge part of the story, the biological mechanisms that are rarely discussed in a routine checkup. Third, we will connect sarcopenia to what I call the Frailty Cascade. You'll see exactly how this one condition acts as the master key, unlocking the door to a host of other problems that can compromise independence later in life, from falls to long hospital stays. And fourth, and most importantly, we will lay out the evidence-based, non-pharmaceutical plan to halt and even reverse its progression. This isn't about wishful thinking, it's about a concrete strategy built on solid science. We will look at all of this through our longevity lens to make sense of it all. And as we explore those hidden drivers, you'll discover that some of the most powerful forces at play are not what you might expect. In fact, a couple of them run directly counter to the conventional health advice many of us have followed for years. And on that topic, I want to call out 2 points in particular, because understanding them can fundamentally change your approach to health as you age. First, as we get into the causes, we will uncover a surprising link between the health of your gut and the strength of your muscles. This is a connection that modern research is only now starting to fully appreciate, and one that very few people, including many doctors, are talking about. The idea that the microscopic world living inside your digestive system could be a key player in determining your physical strength is a true game changer. And second, a little later, I'll reveal what I call the exercise paradox. This is a critical piece of information that has stopped many of my patients in their tracks. We'll explore why one of the most popular and celebrated forms of healthy exercise might be doing very little to build your resilience against sarcopenia. We'll see how, in some cases, if it's not balanced correctly, it could inadvertently make the problem worse, leaving you vulnerable right when you believe you're doing everything right. These are the kinds of counterintuitive truths we need to grasp. But before we dive into the science and unravel these connections, let's ground this conversation in the real-world experiences that bring us all here. Have you, or has someone you care for, ever had a moment like Arthur's with that pickle jar? It doesn't have to be a jar. It might have been the surprising effort it took to lift a full watering can or a suitcase into the overhead bin. Perhaps it was a moment of hesitation before getting up from a low chair, a flicker of instability that no one else noticed. That small, private moment of weakness that you likely explained away, even to yourself, is simply a normal part of getting older. If you feel comfortable, please share that experience in the comments below. It's a powerful thing to do, because as you read through the replies, you will see a universal story emerge. You'll see that you are far from alone. And recognizing that this is a shared challenge, not a personal failing, is the very first step toward taking back control. Every one of those stories, from the stubborn lid to the heavy bag of groceries, is really about the same thing. It's about drawing from a vital reserve of strength that we don't often think about until it starts to run low. To truly understand sarcopenia, we first need to understand that reserve. Let's give that reserve a name, a mental model that will guide us through the rest of this conversation. I call it your muscle reservoir. This is perhaps the most important concept to grasp when looking at health through the longevity lens. I'm not talking about muscles for show, the kind you might see on a bodybuilding stage. This is about something far more fundamental to your quality of life. I want you to think of your muscle mass as a functional bank account of strength, metabolic health, and resilience that you spend your life accumulating. It's your physical armor protecting your skeleton. It's your metabolic sponge helping to manage blood sugar. And critically, it's your body's strategic reserve of protein that it will draw upon during a crisis, a bad flu, a surgery, or an injury. The size of your muscle reservoir directly predicts how well you will weather those inevitable storms of life. Someone with a full reservoir can afford to be bedridden for a week, lose some muscle, and still get back on their feet. But for someone whose reservoir is already low, that same event can be the one-way ticket to a walker and a permanent loss of independence. Everything we're about to discuss, the causes, the risks, and the solutions, comes back to the state of this one vital reservoir. And here is the crucial piece of information that is so often missed. This reservoir isn't static. For every single one of us, it has a slow, silent leak that begins long before we ever notice it. This brings us to the first and perhaps most deceptive principle of how this process works. I call it the silent drain. This slow, almost imperceptible leak begins for everyone right around age 30. The evidence for this is remarkably consistent. The research shows we lose on average between 3 to 8% of our muscle mass every decade after 30. Now, this is precisely why sarcopenia is such a silent thief. You don't feel a 5% loss of muscle in your 40s, you don't feel it in your 50s. And that's because when your reservoir is full, the slow drain is meaningless for your day-to-day life. You have such a vast surplus of strength and function that these small incremental losses are easily absorbed. You still lift the luggage, you still climb the stairs, you still open the pickle jar. Your brain simply recruits a few more muscle fibers to do the job, and you never notice the difference. This is the central deception of sarcopenia. It is a disease of decades, but its consequences appear in just a few years. It's like a coastline slowly eroding. For 30 years, the change is invisible. Then one day a storm comes, and a house that seemed perfectly safe suddenly falls into the sea. The storm didn't cause the problem, it simply revealed the weakness that had been building unnoticed for a generation. For decades, this slow drain on your muscle reservoir has no real impact on your capacity. The danger isn't the leak itself. It's what happens when life brings an unexpected storm and you suddenly discover just how low your reserves have fallen. Second, a lower muscle reservoir means dramatically reduced resilience. This is where the silent problem becomes a loud, life-altering crisis. Let's make this real. Imagine two 75-year-olds who both get a bad case of pneumonia and are bedridden for a week. The first man, let's call him Robert, has spent his life maintaining a full muscle reservoir. When his body is under siege from the illness, it taps into that reservoir, breaking down muscle for fuel and immune cells. He might lose 5% of his total muscle mass. He leaves the hospital feeling terribly weak, but he can still get out of bed, walk to the kitchen, and begin his recovery at home. Now, consider the second man, William. He has the same illness, the same hospital stay. He also loses 5% of his muscle mass. But because his reservoir was already low from decades of the silent drain, that 5% loss pushes him below a critical functional threshold. For him, that's the difference between walking and needing a walker. It's the difference between going home and being discharged to a rehabilitation facility. The illness was the same. The outcome was profoundly different. This is the tipping point. The pneumonia didn't create the vulnerability, it simply exposed it. And for William, this single event isn't just a setback, it's the entry point to a predictable and often irreversible downward spiral, a devastating chain reaction. Third, we must understand this devastating chain reaction. We give it a name to anchor its importance, the Frailty Cascade. It's one of the most predictable and therefore preventable tragedies in modern medicine. And it's vital to see it not as a string of bad luck, but as a set of dominoes lined up and waiting for the first push. That first domino is sarcopenia, the low muscle reservoir we've been discussing. This low reserve leads directly to the second domino, a noticeable decline in strength and critically in balance. You simply don't have the power to rapidly correct a small misstep on an uneven sidewalk. This vulnerability makes the third domino, a fall, not just possible, but statistically probable. The fall then topples the fourth domino, a fracture and the ensuing hospitalization. Most often, it's the hip, an injury that is a well-known turning point in an older person's life. And here is the truly insidious part of the frailty cascade. The hospitalization itself becomes a powerful accelerator of the problem. Prolonged bed rest is poison for aging muscle. It causes a rapid, catastrophic loss of strength far faster than in a younger person. This is the fifth domino. The patient is now trying to recover from major surgery while their very foundation of strength dissolves beneath them. So they are discharged, but often not home. They go to a rehabilitation facility significantly weaker than when they first entered the hospital. This is the sixth domino. They now carry a deep, rational, and paralyzing fear of falling again. That fear becomes the seventh domino. It causes them to move less, to avoid stairs, to say no to social outings. Their world begins to shrink. And that self-imposed inactivity, of course, causes even more muscle loss, which makes them even more unstable. The final dominoes fall in quick succession. Their world constricts, from the community to the house to a single room, until their independence is lost. This isn't a freak accident. It is a predictable, well-documented sequence. The frailty cascade is the endgame, and sarcopenia is the trapdoor that drops you into it. It is the first domino. So to prevent this cascade, we must secure that first domino. We need to be absolutely clear on what sarcopenia actually is, using the official clinical guidelines. Because it's about far more than just muscle size or feeling a bit weaker. It is a specific, measurable condition, and understanding its formal diagnosis is the essential first step in building your defense. So what does it mean to be formally diagnosed with this condition? It's not a vague feeling of weakness. The modern clinical definition, used by international consensus groups like the European Working Group on Sarcopenia, is based on three key factors. First is low muscle mass. This is the anatomical change. Second is low muscle strength. This is most often measured with a simple, powerful test of hand grip strength. And third is poor physical performance, which can be assessed with something as simple as measuring your walking speed. But here is the most important part of the definition, the part that shifts the entire conversation. The primary gateway to a diagnosis is low muscle strength. You can have lower muscle mass, but if your strength is preserved, you don't have sarcopenia. It's a disease of function, not appearance. This distinction is absolutely critical. It explains how someone can look slim and healthy, someone who walks every day and tends to their garden, can still be profoundly vulnerable to the frailty cascade. It's a paradox that leaves many families asking, how did this happen? Let me tell you about Margaret. Let's consider a patient I'll call Margaret. She was the picture of what many would consider healthy aging. At 77, she was slim, had never smoked, and her blood pressure was perfect. Her great joy was her garden, and she walked for an hour every single day, rain or shine. She was active, engaged, and fiercely independent. When her doctor praised her for her walking routine, she'd smile and say, "It keeps me fit." In her mind, she was doing everything right. She consciously avoided any kind of strength training. She'd tell her friends she didn't want to get bulky, and besides, she felt her walking and gardening were more than enough. She was active, and that's what mattered. Her muscle reservoir, however, was critically low. Decades of the silent drain with no deposits from resistance exercise had left her with very little in reserve. Her strength was just enough for her daily activities, but she had no surplus. No buffer for the unexpected. The unexpected arrived on a Tuesday morning in October. It wasn't a dramatic event. She was carrying a small basket of laundry and the corner of a throw rug caught her foot. It was a simple stumble. A stumble that a 30-year-old wouldn't even register. A stumble that a 77-year-old with a full muscle reservoir would have easily corrected with a quick, powerful step. But Margaret lacked that power. Her brain sent the signal to her leg to stabilize, to push off, to recover her balance. But the signal arrived at muscles that no longer had the horsepower to execute the command in the split second required. Her reaction was a fraction too slow, a fraction too weak, and she went down hard. The diagnosis was a fractured hip, and with that, Margaret was plunged directly into the Frailty Cascade. The first domino had fallen. The surgery was successful, but it was followed by 5 days in a hospital bed. For an older adult, prolonged bed rest is catastrophic for muscle. For every day she lay there, her already low muscle reservoir was being drained at a terrifying rate. She was fighting a war of recovery on a foundation of sand. She was discharged to a rehabilitation facility, but she was a different woman. She was weaker, of course, but something else was broken, her confidence. A deep and rational fear of falling took root. Every step was tentative. She shuffled, her eyes fixed on the floor. She started using a walker, not just for support, but as a shield against a world that now seemed filled with hazards. Her hour-long walks in the neighborhood were a distant memory. She became afraid to go out alone. Her world began to shrink. First, she stopped driving. Then she stopped tending her garden, afraid she might lose her balance on the soft soil. Soon, her world was confined to the four walls of her home. 6 months after her fall, Margaret and her children made the difficult decision that she could no longer live independently. She moved into an assisted living facility. Her story isn't one of bad luck. It's a textbook case of sarcopenia. She didn't fall because she was clumsy. She fell because she was weak. She lost her independence not because of the fall itself, but because she lacked the physical reserve to recover from it. Margaret's story is heartbreaking. And what makes it even more so is that it is tragically common. It is a clinical pattern so predictable and so devastating that the global medical community has been forced to stop dismissing it as a normal part of getting older and start calling it what it is, a disease. And a disease needs a formal definition. It needs official recognition. This isn't a fringe concept I've created for this channel or a new wellness trend. In 2016, the World Health Organization, the highest authority in global public health, officially recognized sarcopenia as a distinct disease. They gave it its own specific diagnostic code, M62.84. Now, that might just sound like bureaucratic detail, but its significance is profound. An ICD-10 code is the universal language of medicine. It's what allows doctors to diagnose, hospitals to bill, and researchers to track a condition. It means sarcopenia is now officially in the same category as diabetes, heart disease, or osteoporosis. It is a legitimate medical diagnosis that can and should be identified and managed as part of routine care. And that raises a deeply uncomfortable question. If this is a recognized disease, why is it so rarely discussed in a routine checkup? How many people watching this have ever heard their doctor use the word sarcopenia, let alone propose a plan to monitor or prevent it? The silence from the medical system on this front is one of the great paradoxes of modern preventative health. It's a failure to address the foundation while we wait to react to the cracks. This isn't a localized concern, it's a global medical priority. Expert consensus groups from around the world, like the European Working Group on Sarcopenia in Older People, or EWGSOP2, to the Asian and Latin American working groups, have all published clear, evidence-based guidelines for its diagnosis and management. The science is settled. The experts agree on the threat. But having an official diagnosis code is one thing. Understanding the real-world danger that diagnosis represents, the actual quantifiable risk to your future, is something else entirely. So let's put some hard numbers on this cascade. The evidence is clear and consistent across multiple studies. Older adults with sarcopenia have a 2 to 3 times higher risk of falls. Now, that might sound like just another statistic, but let's visualize what it actually means. Think about a group of 10 of your friends or neighbors over the age of 70. Statistically, if half of them have some degree of sarcopenia, the research tells us that those 5 individuals are far more likely to be the ones who suffer a life-altering fall in the coming years. It's like they are navigating the world on a more treacherous and unpredictable surface. And as we've established, a fall is never just a fall. For an older adult with a low muscle reservoir, it's the spark that ignites the Frailty Cascade. It's the event that leads to the hospital, to the surgery, to the loss of confidence, and so often to the loss of independence. But the risks don't stop there. The data consistently shows that sarcopenia is linked to a higher risk of complications from any surgery, longer and more difficult hospital stays, and tragically, a higher overall mortality rate. It acts as a powerful, independent predictor of how well you will fare in the face of any medical challenge, from a bout of influenza to a major operation. This isn't just a collection of personal tragedies, it's a massive societal burden. More than 2 decades ago, a landmark study estimated the direct healthcare costs attributable to sarcopenia in the United States were over $18 billion a year. That's a number from 2004. Adjusted for inflation and our aging population, that figure today is astronomically higher. We are paying an immense price, both personally and collectively, for ignoring the health of our muscles. Now, hearing all of this can be concerning. The idea of a silent drain on your strength, leading to a cascade of frailty, is a heavy one. But the entire reason we are having this difficult conversation, the reason for pulling back the curtain on this silent epidemic, is because of one profoundly hopeful fact. Unlike so many other conditions associated with aging, sarcopenia is not a one-way street. It is highly manageable, and in many cases, it can be reversed. The defense against this cascade isn't waiting in a prescription bottle. It's not found in a complex medical procedure. It is a strategy that you can build day by day in your own life. This strategy rests on 3 fundamental pillars, a foundation for your future independence. We call them the right fuel, the right signal, and the right recovery. Each one of these pillars directly counters a specific biological process that drives sarcopenia forward. And later in this video, we are going to break down exactly what each one means in practical, actionable terms. We will give you the complete blueprint for rebuilding your muscle reservoir. But to truly understand why this 3-pillar defense is so powerful, we must first understand the hidden enemies it's designed to fight. We need to look under the hood at the specific drivers that cause this silent drain to begin in the first place. It all starts with the first and most important driver, a subtle shift in your body's chemistry that makes your muscles, in a sense, hard of hearing. So let's pull back the curtain on the first of these hidden drivers. This is the central mechanism that allows the silent drain on your muscle reservoir to accelerate over time. The scientific term for it is anabolic resistance. Now, before that term sounds too complex, let's break it down. Anabolic simply means to build up. It's the opposite of catabolic, which means to break down. Your muscles are in a constant state of turnover, a delicate dance between these two forces. To maintain and especially to build your muscle reservoir, the build-up signal needs to be consistently louder than the breakdown signal. The 2 most powerful anabolic signals in the human body are remarkably simple. First, there's the signal from high-quality protein in your diet, which provides the raw building blocks. Second, there's the signal from resistance exercise, which is the architectural command to use those blocks to build stronger structures. Here is the crucial point that is so often missed, and it requires a bit of nuance. As we age, our muscle cells don't stop responding to these signals. Instead, they become less sensitive to them. It's as if they become hard of hearing. The same amount of protein in a meal that would have triggered a robust muscle-building response in a 30-year-old might only create a faint murmur of a response in a 70-year-old. The same physical activity that used to maintain your strength is no longer a loud enough stimulus to command new growth. This is the very definition of anabolic resistance. It's a state where your body requires a stronger signal to achieve the same result. This explains why so many people can be eating what they consider a healthy diet and staying active, yet still be losing precious muscle. They aren't sending a signal that is loud enough to overcome this natural, age-related resistance. They're whispering at a muscle that needs to be shouted at to get its attention. To make this concept stick, to really visualize why simply eating well isn't enough, it helps to use a clear analogy. Let's imagine your muscle cells are waiting for a radio transmission, a specific broadcast with one simple instruction. It's time to build and repair. In your youth, that radio is perfectly tuned. The antenna's high and the signal comes in crystal clear. You eat a meal containing a moderate amount of protein. The broadcast is received loud and clear, and your muscles immediately get to work. But as the years go by, static begins to creep onto the line. This is anabolic resistance. The protein from your food is still being sent out. But the radio in your muscle cell is having trouble picking it up. The signal is weak, fuzzy, and often gets lost in the noise of other metabolic processes. A meal that once produced a clear command now barely registers. Your muscles are straining to hear the instructions, but the message simply isn't getting through with the clarity it needs. So what do you do when a radio signal is weak and full of static? You turn up the volume. You need a stronger, more powerful broadcast to cut through the noise and deliver the message. And this is the crucial insight that runs directly counter to so much conventional advice given to older adults. Turning up the volume in this context means consuming a sufficient dose of high-quality protein in a single sitting. Spreading a small amount of protein across many light meals throughout the day is like sending a constant, weak, staticky signal. It's always on, but it never gets loud enough to overcome the resistance and deliver a clear command. To get the message through, the scientific evidence suggests you need to send a powerful pulse, a concentrated bolus of protein that is strong enough to blast through the static and decisively flip the muscle-building switch. This is precisely why the common dietary pattern of a very light, low-protein breakfast, followed by a salad with just a sprinkle of chicken for lunch, can be a quiet recipe for muscle loss, even if it seems healthy on the surface. Each of those signals is too quiet to be heard. This single biological fact explains the frustrating paradox we see so often. People who are convinced they are doing everything right, eating carefully, staying active, but are still unknowingly caught in the silent drain of their muscle reservoir. It's a tragic case of sending the right message, but with the volume turned down too low. Let me tell you about a man I'll call David. He was 71 and meticulously followed the health advice he'd read for years. He walked 10,000 steps a day, every day, tracking it on his watch. He was proud of his consistency. He'd also overhauled his diet, convinced he was doing what was best for his heart and his waistline. He consciously avoided red meat and large, heavy meals, believing that eating light was the key to healthy aging. His typical day of eating looked like this: a slice of whole wheat toast with jam for breakfast. For lunch, a large, vibrant salad filled with greens, but with only a few small pieces of grilled chicken breast on top. For dinner, he'd have a modest, palm-sized piece of fish with steamed vegetables. To him, and to most people, this diet looked like the picture of health. It was low in fat, rich in fiber, and controlled in calories. But at his annual checkup, his doctor noted that David had lost 6 pounds since the previous year. David was pleased. He assumed it was fat. But a closer look at his body composition told a different story. He hadn't lost fat, he had lost muscle. He was weaker. His grip strength had declined. He felt more tired than usual, but had chalked it up to just another birthday. David was a perfect and tragic victim of anabolic resistance. He was doing everything he thought was right, but he was caught in this hidden trap. Each of his meals was a weak radio signal, lost in the static of his aging biology. The toast for breakfast sent almost no muscle-building signal at all. The small portion of chicken at lunch was a faint whisper. The modest piece of fish at dinner was another quiet broadcast, too weak to command his body to build and repair. He was sending 3 separate, low-volume signals throughout the day, never once turning up the volume enough to overcome the resistance and trigger meaningful muscle protein synthesis. Meanwhile, the natural 24-hour process of muscle breakdown, the catabolic side of the equation, was continuing unopposed. His daily walk was excellent for his heart, but it wasn't a strong enough stimulus to tell his leg muscles they needed to get stronger. So day by day, his muscle reservoir was being drained despite his best intentions. His story is a powerful illustration of how conventional health wisdom, focused on calorie restriction and light meals, can inadvertently accelerate the very problem we want to prevent. David's diet wasn't wrong, it was just insufficient for the new biological reality of his age. He wasn't sending a loud enough signal. This idea of anabolic resistance, of needing to turn up the volume, is so fundamental. I'd like to pause on this for a moment because it's a critical point. Does this idea of anabolic resistance, this concept that your muscles effectively become hard of hearing with age, change the way you look at your own plate? For decades, the prevailing wisdom handed down to many of us was that the path to healthy aging was through smaller, lighter meals. We were told to ease the burden on our digestive system. Yet the hard evidence for preserving our muscle reservoir suggests this very advice could be an unintentional trap. It encourages a pattern of sending weak, staticky signals that are never loud enough to command growth and repair. It's a profound, and for many, a counterintuitive shift in thinking. I'd be interested to hear if this concept resonates. You can just let me know with a simple yes in the comments below. It truly helps me understand what information is making the biggest impact. Because getting this build signal right is absolutely essential. But it's only one half of the equation. What if, at the very same time, there was another hidden force actively turning up the volume on the breakdown signal? This is where we close that first loop I teased at the start of our conversation, uncovering the surprising link between chronic inflammation, your gut, and the strength of your entire body. The second hidden driver of sarcopenia is a process scientists now call inflammaging. It refers to the chronic, low-grade systemic inflammation that tends to increase as we get older. Think of it as a constant low-level static of irritation running in the background of your body. And here is the critical piece of information. Inflammation sends a powerful catabolic signal. It is a biological command to break things down. Sarcopenia happens when this constant catabolic whisper from inflammation becomes louder than the anabolic or build-up signal you're trying to send with protein and exercise. You can be doing everything right with your diet, but if your body is in a state of high inflammation, you're fighting an uphill battle. You're trying to build a house while a demolition crew is quietly working on the other side. So where does this inflammation come from? One of the primary drivers is the health of our gut microbiome. An imbalance in our gut bacteria or a compromised gut lining can allow inflammatory molecules to leak into the bloodstream, creating that body-wide, smoldering fire. This directly contributes to the breakdown of your muscle reservoir. This isn't just a theory, it is a hard biological reality etched into the data of thousands of lives. Large-scale long-term studies, the gold standard of medical evidence, have followed older adults for years, taking regular blood samples and measuring their strength, and the conclusion they've reached is unanimous and chilling. Higher levels of common inflammatory markers in the blood, things like C-reactive protein or CRP, and another called interleukin-6, can directly predict the rate of muscle and strength loss that a person will experience over the following years. Let me say that again, because it is one of the most important and overlooked facts in the science of aging. The level of silent, low-grade inflammation inside your body today is a direct forecast of your physical weakness tomorrow. It's like having a spy on the inside, reporting back on the future vulnerability of your own body. Your doctor routinely checks your cholesterol to predict your future risk of a heart attack. They check your blood sugar to predict your future risk of diabetes. But this powerful predictor of your future independence, your inflammatory state, is rarely, if ever, part of the conversation in a standard checkup. This is the very definition of a silent process. It's a constant catabolic pressure that you cannot feel, working against you every hour of every day. And it fundamentally changes the equation. It means that to protect your muscle reservoir, you have to do two things at once. You must turn up the volume on the build signals with protein and exercise, while also doing everything you can to turn down the volume on this destructive breakdown signal from inflammation. Your internal inflammatory state is actively eating away at your muscle reservoir day by day. So the next logical question is the most important one. If this smoldering internal fire is so destructive to our future strength and independence, where exactly is it coming from? And what can we do to put it out? The answer reveals a cascade of its own, linking the food we eat, the stress we carry, and even the quality of our sleep directly to the health of our muscles. This internal fire, this inflammaging, isn't a mysterious force. Its sources are woven into the very fabric of modern life. They are the highly processed foods, packed with refined sugars and industrial seed oils, that make up a growing portion of our diet. It's the chronic stress that keeps our cortisol levels elevated, a hormone that is profoundly catabolic. It's the poor sleep that robs our body of its critical repair and recovery window. And it's the excess visceral fat, the metabolically active fat stored deep within our abdomen, which acts like a relentless factory, pumping out inflammatory molecules 24 hours a day. Together, these forces create what I call a constant catabolic pressure on your muscles. Think of it this way, trying to build muscle by only eating more protein while ignoring inflammation is like trying to fill a bucket with a hole in the bottom. You can pour in all the water you want, but you'll be constantly losing ground to the leak. It's an exhausting and ultimately losing battle. This reveals a fundamental truth that is so often missed in conversations about aging. You cannot isolate one part of the body. To protect your muscles, you must address the health of the entire system. You have to both increase the build signals, turning up the volume with sufficient protein, and simultaneously decrease the breakdown signals by putting out the inflammatory fire. It is a war that must be fought on two fronts. So we have two powerful drivers working against our muscle reservoir. Anabolic resistance makes our muscles hard of hearing. Chronic inflammation creates a constant pressure to break them down. These are problems of fuel and environment. But there is a third, equally critical driver we must understand. And this one can feel the most unsettling because it has less to do with the muscle tissue itself and everything to do with the wiring that controls it. Sarcopenia, it turns out, is also a disease of the nervous system. Think of it like this. Your muscle is the engine, but your nervous system is the ignition and the accelerator. For a muscle fiber to contract, it must receive a direct command from a specialized nerve cell called a motor neuron. These are the long electrical wires that run from your spinal cord out to your muscles, carrying the brain's instructions. Each motor neuron connects to and controls a small team of muscle fibers. The third hidden driver of sarcopenia is that as we age, we begin to lose these motor neurons. They simply die off, and the connections are severed. When a motor neuron is lost, the team of muscle fibers it once controlled is left without a commander. They are effectively orphaned. They become disconnected from the central command, silent, and inactive. Now, your body is remarkable and has a rescue mechanism. A healthy, nearby motor neuron can sometimes sprout a new connection, like extending a new branch, to adopt these orphaned fibers and bring them back online. But this rescue process becomes less efficient as we get older. Over time, more and more muscle fibers become permanently orphaned. And without a signal to contract, they have no purpose. They wither away and are eventually lost for good. This neuromuscular decline is a core and often overlooked part of the sarcopenic process. It explains why strength can sometimes decline even faster than muscle size. The engine might still be there, but the wiring is being disconnected. But this process isn't random. The body doesn't lose all types of wiring at the same rate. And this is where we uncover a cruel twist of biological irony. The very first wires to get cut are the ones that control the precise type of muscle you need most to protect yourself from a sudden disaster. The motor neurons that are most vulnerable, the ones that tend to die off first, are the ones that control our largest, most powerful, fast-twitch muscle fibers, what scientists call type 2 fibers. These are not your endurance muscles. They aren't the fibers you use for a long, slow walk. These are your emergency response muscles. They are the fibers that contract with explosive speed and force. They are what you use to jump out of the way of a car, to push yourself up from a low chair without using your hands, or, most critically, to catch yourself in that split second when you stumble. They are your body's built-in safety system. And they are the first to go. This is the hidden reason why power, the ability to generate force quickly, is lost at a much faster rate than raw strength. You might still have the strength to slowly lift a heavy bag of groceries from the floor to the counter. That's strength. But you may have lost the power to instantly react and stabilize yourself when you trip over a rug. That's power. The very thing that separates a minor stumble from a catastrophic fall is the explosive capability of these fast-twitch fibers. The irony is as profound as it is dangerous. The body's natural aging process selectively dismantles the very system you need most to protect yourself from sudden, life-altering injury. The emergency brake line is the first one to be cut. It's a quiet internal sabotage that leaves you profoundly vulnerable, even while you feel you still have a decent amount of your old strength. This might be the most alarming piece of the puzzle we've discussed. But understanding this specific mechanism is not a reason for despair. It is the key to our defense. Because if we know precisely which system is failing, we can implement a precise strategy to target and rebuild it. This isn't about generic exercise. It's about a superior non-medical solution designed to specifically rescue those fast-twitch fibers and rewire your body for resilience. So we have these three powerful drivers working against us: anabolic resistance, inflammation, and neuromuscular decline. It's a formidable trio. But the good news is that we have an equally powerful non-medical solution that directly counters them. It begins with providing the right fuel to overcome that anabolic resistance, and this is the single most effective intervention we have, bar none. The scientific consensus is clear. To flip the muscle-building switch in an older adult, you need to reach a specific protein threshold in a single meal. The target is between 25 and 30 grams of high-quality protein. This is the volume we need to turn up to cut through the static of anabolic resistance. Less than this, and the signal is often too weak to trigger a meaningful response. So what does that look like on a plate? It's simpler than you might think. It's a chicken breast about the size of your palm. It's a large can of tuna. It's a cup of Greek yogurt mixed with a handful of nuts and seeds. Or for many, it's a scoop and a half of whey protein powder in a shake, an incredibly efficient way to hit the target. The specific trigger within that protein is an amino acid called leucine. Think of it as the specific key that fits the ignition of your muscle-building machinery. You need enough leucine in one sitting to turn the key and start the engine. Spreading your protein out in small doses throughout the day is like getting the key close to the ignition, but never actually turning it. Now, I know for many, the immediate concern is that much protein safe for my kidneys? This is a myth born from a misunderstanding. For individuals with pre-existing severe kidney disease, protein intake must be carefully managed. But for the vast majority of older adults with normal kidney function, the evidence from numerous studies shows that these higher protein intakes are not only safe, but necessary for maintaining muscle mass and function. This is our first pillar of defense. It is simple, it is based on decades of evidence, and it puts a powerful tool directly in your hands. It is the fuel. But fuel, no matter how high quality, is useless without the right signal to tell the body what to do with it. And this is where we must confront the exercise paradox I mentioned earlier, the critical and often misunderstood difference between being active and being strong. Because the most popular form of exercise in the world might not be the signal you think it is. Millions of people, just like Margaret in our story, spend their lives being faithfully active. They walk, they jog, they cycle at a steady pace. And let me be absolutely clear, these activities are fantastic for your cardiovascular health, for your mood, and for your overall well-being. I wholeheartedly encourage them. But for building and maintaining your muscle reservoir, they are sending a very weak signal. Remember, your muscles grow in response to a specific command, the command to overcome a challenge that is difficult. For most people who have been walking for years, a walk is no longer difficult. It's an endurance task, not a strength-building one. It maintains the system, but it doesn't command it to get stronger. It whispers when the body needs a shout. But the paradox goes deeper than just sending a weak signal. In certain situations, this type of exercise can create a dangerous catch-22, a biological trap where your pursuit of heart health could come at the direct expense of your muscle. Let's break down exactly what that means. Here's the fundamental principle. Muscle only grows or is even maintained when it is forced to do something it finds difficult. This is called overload. It's the signal that tells your body, this was hard, I need to build stronger for next time. For the vast majority of adults, a simple walk on a flat surface is not difficult. It doesn't provide overload. It's an efficient, low-stress movement that the body is perfectly adapted to. It's a maintenance activity, not a building one. But here is the catch-22, the paradoxical risk. If you engage in very long-duration endurance exercise, think long-distance running or cycling, without paying meticulous attention to your nutrition, you can actually accelerate muscle loss. When you exercise for an extended period, your body burns through its available carbohydrate stores for energy. Once those are low, it needs fuel from somewhere else. And if you haven't consumed enough protein, your body can begin to break down its own muscle tissue, your muscle reservoir, to convert that protein into usable energy. This is a process called gluconeogenesis. This creates the ultimate paradox. You can be getting fitter from a cardiovascular perspective, improving your VO2 max and heart function, while at the same time becoming weaker from a muscular one. You're essentially trading your functional strength for endurance. For a professional athlete, this is a calculated trade-off. But for an older adult whose greatest threat to independence is not a slow marathon time, but a sudden fall, it is a catastrophic trade. You are sacrificing the very armor that protects you from the Frailty Cascade in the pursuit of an activity that sends a weak and potentially even catabolic signal to your muscles. The solution then is not to stop walking or abandon cardiovascular exercise. It is to change its position in your hierarchy of health. It should be the supporting cast, not the lead actor. The lead role must be given to the one form of activity that directly commands your body to build and protect muscle. I could tell you another story here. A story about a lifelong marathon runner, incredibly fit by all cardiovascular measures, who still found himself on the precipice of the Frailty Cascade in his 70s. It would be a compelling, cautionary tale. But I'm not going to. Because the evidence on this point is so overwhelming, so profoundly conclusive, that to reduce it to a single anecdote would be a disservice to its sheer statistical power. The truth here is more impactful than any one person's story because it applies to every person's story. When scientists want the most definitive answer to a medical question, they don't rely on a single study. They conduct systematic reviews and meta-analyses, the highest form of evidence, which combines the results of dozens of high-quality, independent trials from around the world. And on the question of how to stop sarcopenia, these reviews have come to a unanimous, undisputed conclusion. Progressive resistance training is the single most effective intervention we have to combat the loss of muscle mass, strength, and power as we age. The effect is not small, it is not debatable, it is large and remarkably consistent across the board. It is the only signal loud enough to command the body to not only preserve, but to actively rebuild the muscle reservoir, rewiring the nervous system and rescuing those critical fast-twitch fibers. This isn't a theory. It is as close to a clinical certainty as we get in medicine. This knowledge gives us a firm foundation to build upon. It allows us to move past the confusion and the paradoxes with confidence. So we have laid bare the problem, we've named the hidden drivers, and the stakes for your future are crystal clear. Now we pivot. We move from understanding the threat to actively building your defense. This is the practical, actionable framework I promised at the beginning of our conversation. I call it the Keystone 3-Pillar Protocol. It's designed to be simple to remember and, more importantly, simple to implement, because the best plan is the one you will actually use. Each pillar is a direct and powerful countermeasure to one of the hidden drivers we have just uncovered. They work in concert systematically to rebuild your muscle reservoir from the ground up. Pillar number 1 is protein pacing. This is our specific evidence-based strategy to overcome anabolic resistance, ensuring your muscles finally hear a clear and powerful signal to grow and repair. Pillar number 2 is progressive resistance. This is our targeted weapon against neuromuscular decline, designed to specifically rescue those critical fast-twitch fibers and rewire your body for power and stability. And pillar number 3 is prioritizing recovery. This is our plan to extinguish the smoldering fires of inflammaging, creating the calm internal environment that allows true rebuilding to occur. To make this immediately useful, we're going to translate each of these pillars into a simple, empowering question you can ask yourself. I suggest you grab a pen and paper or open the Notes app on your phone because these questions will become your daily checklist. They are your new blueprint for taking back control and building a future defined by strength and independence. All right, let's build your defense plan. The first question addresses Pillar 1, protein pacing. This is our direct countermeasure to anabolic resistance. I want you to ask yourself this every single day. Am I eating 25 to 30 grams of high-quality protein with at least 2 and preferably 3 of my meals? This question is about dosage and timing. It's about sending a signal loud enough to be heard. So what does that look like on your plate? It's not an intimidating amount of food. 30 grams of protein is a chicken breast about the size of your own palm. It's a 5 or 6 ounce fillet of salmon. It's 1 large can of tuna or a full cup of Greek yogurt mixed with a generous handful of almonds. For many, a single scoop of a high-quality whey or plant-based protein powder in a shake is the most efficient way to hit this target. The key here is the dose, concentrated in a single meal. Spreading that same amount of protein out in small portions throughout the day is like sending a dozen quiet whispers. To overcome the static of anabolic resistance, your muscles need to hear 2 or 3 powerful, clear shouts. That is protein pacing. The second question is for Pillar 2, progressive resistance. This is our targeted weapon against neuromuscular decline. Ask yourself this each week. Am I challenging my major muscle groups with resistance training at least twice per week? There are 2 critical words in that question, challenging and progressive. Challenging means the work is difficult. Here is the single most important rule to follow. The last 1 or 2 repetitions of any given set should be genuinely hard to complete while maintaining good form. You should feel your muscles straining. That moment of struggle is not a sign of failure. It is the biological signal for success. That is the moment you are commanding your body to build. If you can easily complete all your repetitions, the signal is too weak. Progressive means that over time, the challenge must increase. If you are using the same weights for the same number of repetitions week after week, your body has already adapted. The signal has gone silent. Progression is simple. It can mean adding 1 more repetition. It can mean using a slightly heavier dumbbell or a stronger resistance band. It can mean slowing down the movement to make it harder. The tool itself, whether it's your own body weight, simple bands, or a set of weights, matters far less than this unwavering principle of making it progressively harder over time. This is the only language your nervous system understands to recruit and rescue those critical fast-twitch fibers. Finally, the third question addresses Pillar 3, prioritizing recovery. This is our strategy to extinguish the fires of inflammaging. The question is, am I consistently getting 7 to 8 hours of quality sleep, and am I actively managing my stress? This pillar is about turning down the catabolic breakdown signals. It's the most overlooked, yet arguably one of the most vital components of this protocol. You don't actually get stronger while you exercise. You get stronger while you recover from it. The vast majority of muscle repair and tissue growth happens during the deep stages of sleep. When you consistently get less than 7 hours, you are robbing your body of its prime-time construction window. It's like paying a crew to rebuild your foundation, but sending them home halfway through their shift every single night. Chronic stress is just as damaging. It keeps the destructive hormone cortisol elevated. Cortisol is profoundly catabolic. Its job is to break down tissues, including your muscle, for quick energy. This creates that constant, corrosive pressure on your muscle reservoir. Actively managing stress through mindfulness, meditation, walking in nature, or whatever practice works for you is not a soft luxury intervention. It is a non-negotiable part of reducing the catabolic signals that are actively working to dismantle your strength. These 3 pillars, protein pacing, progressive resistance, and prioritizing recovery, form your personal blueprint for defending and rebuilding your independence. This is the evidence-based plan you can start today. But I know what the next logical question is. What will my doctor think of all this? How do you take this proactive plan into the clinical world? And how can you ensure that your physician is an ally in this process, not an obstacle? At your next visit, I encourage you to ask a clear, direct question. Given the importance of muscle for my long-term independence, what is our plan to monitor and protect my muscle mass as I age? The response you receive will be incredibly telling. If your doctor dismisses the question, perhaps with a well-meaning but patronizing smile, and says, "Oh, that's just a normal part of getting older," I want you to recognize that for what it is. That is a red flag. It's a sign that they may not be current on the modern science of aging, which now clearly defines sarcopenia as a manageable disease, not an inevitable fate. It suggests they are still operating from an outdated playbook of passive acceptance. A proactive physician, on the other hand, one who is truly practicing through the longevity lens, will lean in. They will see you as an informed partner. They might suggest measuring your hand grip strength right there in the office, a simple test that is a powerful predictor of future health. They may time your walking speed or open a real conversation about your protein intake and resistance training. They will welcome your engagement and see it as an asset to your care. This isn't about challenging their authority, it's about seeking a true partnership. Because having this conversation is about so much more than managing a diagnostic code or tracking numbers on a chart. It's about ensuring that your medical care is aligned with your deepest and most fundamental goal. In the end, this entire conversation about protein thresholds, progressive resistance, and the science of recovery is not about vanity. It is not about looking good in a mirror or recapturing the exact physique of your youth. It is about something far more fundamental. It is about living well. It is about having the raw physical strength to scoop up your grandchild for a hug without a moment's hesitation. It's about possessing the quiet, confident stability to travel, to navigate uneven cobblestone streets in a city you've always wanted to see on your own terms. It's about having the explosive power to live safely and independently in your own home, surrounded by your own memories, without the constant low-level fear of a fall dictating your choices. And perhaps most importantly, it's about cultivating the deep biological resilience to bounce back from whatever life inevitably throws at you, a bad flu, an unexpected surgery, or a period of high stress, and to emerge on the other side still you. This is the true meaning of health span. And your muscle reservoir is the currency you will use to purchase it. It is the strategic reserve of independence that you will spend day by day in your later years. The investments you make today, the consistent deposits in the kitchen, and the challenging work in your training are the most powerful contributions you will ever make to your future quality of life. They will pay dividends of freedom and function for decades to come, long after financial investments have been spent. This is the very essence of looking at health through the longevity lens. It represents a fundamental shift in our entire approach to medicine. A shift away from a system that is brilliant at finding problems and naming diseases towards a proactive partnership that is relentlessly focused on building your capacity to live well, regardless of what challenges may arise. It is the critical difference between a medicine that simply asks, "What is wrong with you?" and a medicine that asks, "What do we need to build to make you robust?" This is the conversation that changes the trajectory of a life. It is the knowledge that empowers you to be the chief architect of your own future, not a passive observer of your own decline. It's a framework for taking control. If this approach to health, one that is proactive, grounded in evidence, and relentlessly focused on your quality of life, is what you've been searching for, then I invite you to subscribe and join our growing community of proactive individuals. My commitment to you is to regularly post videos just like this one, videos that cut through the noise and the confusing headlines. We're here to translate the dense medical research, the kind of information often buried in scientific journals, into practical strategies you can use, not in 10 years, but tomorrow morning. By subscribing, you're not just getting an alert for a new video. You're ensuring you have a trusted resource that is always looking at health through the longevity lens, asking the right questions on your behalf. It's a simple click, but it represents a powerful commitment to yourself, a decision to stop being a passive passenger in your own health journey and to start actively charting your course towards a future defined by strength and independence. Because it's one thing to understand the science we've discussed today, it's another thing entirely to put it into action in your own life. So let's bring this all back down to a single intentional step. At the very beginning of this video, I asked you to share your pickle jar moment, that small, surprising sign of weakness that so many of us have been taught to brush aside as just getting older. Now, with a clearer understanding of the science behind that moment, I have a different and, I believe, more powerful question for you. Knowing what you now know about the silent drain of sarcopenia, and more importantly, the power you have to refill your own muscle reservoir, what is the one small, concrete action you feel inspired to take this week? This doesn't have to be a monumental change. This is not about overhauling your entire life overnight. Perhaps it's a simple decision to consciously add a protein-rich food like Greek yogurt or a couple of eggs to your breakfast tomorrow morning to start hitting that protein target. Maybe it's opening a new tab on your browser right now and searching for a beginner's resistance training routine for over 60s. Or perhaps it's simply scheduling that conversation with your doctor, armed with the right questions to become a true partner in your own care. Whatever that first step is for you, I encourage you to share that commitment in the comments below. This isn't just for me, it's for each other. Your one small intention might be the exact inspiration another person in this community needs to see today to begin their own journey from passive acceptance to proactive defense. Reading them inspires us all. Thank you for your time and your attention. After seeing how silently sarcopenia drains your strength, what is the one small concrete action you'll commit to this week? Answer in the comments below. I read and reply to every single one. But rebuilding muscle is just the start of the bigger picture. In the next video, we reveal how a simple nap can either supercharge your memory or completely ruin your night's sleep. Subscribe with notifications on so you don't miss the truth. Like this video and share it with someone who needs to see this.